Tsitsi nervous conditions, we are introduced to a girl, Tambu, who has been raised in Rhodesia. After her brother dies, she gets a chance to go to school. This school is taught by missionaries who want to help the people of Rhodesia become more civilized. They are attempting to save, but in truth are imperializing these people. Tambu, as a Rhodesian woman, is not only suppressed by the British colonial culture that is educating her, but also that of her family's patriarchal structure. While the white British missionaries are trying to save Tambu from the culture that they see as uncivilized, her family attempts to preserve the culture of her land, and Tambu finds herself stuck in between these two worlds. I argue that the saving of the Subaltern woman by colonial England and post-colonial Rhodesia's native patriarchy is a new way of imposing colonial ideas and lifestyles, which is ineffective in helping the Subaltern woman. Gerardis Spivak's article, Can the Subaltern Speak?, discusses the impossibilities of returning the cultures to those who have been colonized. Leila Abdullah-Quote's Do Muslims Really Need Saving? Anthropological Reflections on Cultural Relativism and its others, shows how, in attempting to save a person from a culture that we deem as harmful, we are taking something from them. While we may think we are helping, we find ourselves doing more damage. And lastly, Helene Sixtu's The Laugh of Medusa discusses the importance of language and how people who are oppressed often find themselves using the language of their oppressors. Together, these three articles, and Tsitsi Nervous Conditions, helps to illuminate the plight of the subaltern woman in a world filled with British cultures versus African cultures. In Tsitsi Nervous Condition, the young woman Tambu has an opportunity to go to school. However, it is not until her brother dies that she can even go, due to finances and her family's gender hierarchy, which puts men above women based on their education and age. Because he is male, her brother's education is viewed as more of a necessity. He is able to go to school and return to take care of the family in his natural place in the family's hierarchy as a man. After Namo's death, as the eldest child in the family with no more sons, Tambu is finally able to continue her education that she craves because she no longer has any brothers who can be put before her. She moves in with her aunt and uncle and begins her classes in the mission. In entering the mission, Tambu begins to inform the readers of the difference between the white person and the missionaries who is there not to take but to give, and those who are there just to take. She begins on telling the reader that the people in the missionary are a special kind of white person. Unlike the others, these people here have a purpose. They are there to educate the Rhodesian in their culture and save them to the Christian religion. She calls them special. One would assume that because they are special, they should be looked upon fondly. However, this does not seem to be the case. She follows the comment by telling us that it was her grandmother who had once explained her presence. Her grandmother had told her that these people were holy. Being holy suggests they have an almost angelic presence. They're helpers of God, and they're of good intent. It is also important that we recognize that it's Tambu's grandmother who told her this. This displays just how long the British colonialists have been there. Her grandmother has had experiences with them, and now so has Tambu. This suggests at least 3 generations of their presence. It is at this point that Tambu seems to take a sarcastic turn in her description. Tambu informs readers that the missionaries were about God's business there in the darkest Africa. While she is using the British language throughout the entire novel, this is one of the places it's most prevalent. While Tambu explains to the readers that the British missionaries were there to give, the sentence shows us just how much they have taken. Using their language, she is expressing how she has lost much of her own. Calling them holy or saying that they are doing the work of God is something she would have picked up from them in school. Calling her home darkest Africa has a different sounding connotation. She uses it with the intent of describing the beauty of her home, while the imperialist would use it to describe it as uncivilized. Tambu uses this irony to show how the imperialist education she has received has warped her language. In telling us that they are trying to give, she shows us just how much they have taken. Tambu's use of language and word choice in this section shows that the good intentions of saving Tambu has led to a loss of part of her culture in the process. The colonials are constantly attempting to save Tambu from a culture that they do not understand and in the end take more from her than they give. While Leila Abu Makhloud's article, Do One's Poem Really Need Saving? An Anthropological Reflection on Cultural Relativism and its Others, focuses mainly on the Muslim woman, it is still applicable to the plight of Tambu as a Rhodesian scholar. Abu Makhloud's article questions whether the saving of women from other cultures actually does anything to help them. Not only does she make the reader question what it means to save women, but she also brings to our attention that in saving women from something, we're also saving them to something. In other words, we're saving something, we are also often bringing them to something else. For example, if you see someone drowning and you choose to save them, you're not just saving them from water, but you're saving them to land. While Tambu is not drowning, she is still being saved from one thing to another. In her case, a British colonial is trying to save her from her culture, which they have deemed as uncivilized. Therefore, they must be saving her to their own culture, which they believe to be better. They do this through the education that they give her. By not only educating her in their ideals and what they see fit to help her, they are implying that they are better and therefore better for her. In the end, Tambu's culture is overshadowed by the British colonials, and it is lost. They only teach what they believe God would want them to, and therefore Tambu learns about British history and Christianity, but not her own history and culture. Not once in the novels does Tambu's character mention learning anything about her family's religion in school. They are ignoring her beliefs and only teaching her what they see fit. This becomes more problematic as we see extend past the British colonial mission to save and into Tambu's own family through her uncle Baba Mukuru. Baba Mukuru has been so immersed into the culture of the British colonialism that he pushes it on his own family without reflecting on its benefits or harms. When Tambu's father, Jeremiah, intends to take Lucia as a second wife, Baba Mukuru is infuriated because Jeremiah is performing an act that is strictly taboo in many cultures. Because of Jeremiah's promiscuity with Lucia, reflects poorly on the entire family. Baba Mukuru insists that Jeremiah purify himself and his wife that he already has through, through a traditional wedding ceremony, a Christian wedding ceremony. Even Baba Mukuru, a Rhodesian man, has begun to push the ideas of the British colonial onto his entire family. This is the problem that Abu Makhloud sees with saving people from their cultures. In saving them, we're simply trading one problematic cultural practice for another one and run the risk of taking theirs away completely. Baba Mukuru has been so thoroughly saved that he has begun to save his own family from the culture that he himself is a product of. Baba Mukuru cannot see that he has lost a sense of himself and his own culture and is forcing his family to also give up a piece of themselves. We see this issue transfer into Spivak's article, Can the Subaltern Speak? This article addresses the issue of how when one country enacts imperialism on a group of people, they take the voices of those who have been imperialized. Imperialism then takes the subaltern's culture and replaces it with what they view as more civilized or better. Spivak discusses how we are now attempting to return the voices to the oppressed. She then follows with the question of whether or not it is possible due to the lack of listening to what they had wanted in the first place. The character Tambu from Tsitsi Nervous Conditions is a subaltern. She is of lower status than everyone around her. As a Rhodesian, she is of lower status than any British colonial. She is also a woman, is therefore lower status than the Rhodesian man in her household. Thus, she is doubly removed from the center and lacks a voice. Tambu is portraying the role of a third-world woman caught between tradition and modernization. She is stuck somewhere in between the British colonial ideology that is attempting to save her and the native patriarchy, which is attempting to preserve her place within it. As she goes to school, she is educated in the ways of the British without any acknowledgement of her own history and traditions. They have asked Tambu if she would like to be educated, and they have given her that. However, they have never asked her what she wants to be educated on. They only educate her on what they see fit and ignore her history and language. On the other hand, Tambu's family does not see the necessity of her education until they see a material benefit from it. It is not until the death of Tambu's brother Namo that she is even allowed to continue her learning. Her family believes that her place is at home helping her mother, and only permit education with the premise that she will come home and support the family. Because Tambu is a woman, they ignore her wants. They believe they know what is best for her, and much like the British colonial regime, only allow what they see fit for her. No matter where Tambu goes, she is being spoken for. Each time Tambu tries to speak for herself, she is quickly silenced. For example, when she initially tells her family that she wants to return to school, they ignore her because she is a woman, and they can see no benefit for the family as a whole. Even when she offers to raise the money on her own, her attempt is treated with disinterest. Her mother only allows her to try because her mother is convinced that Tambu will not be able to and will learn a lesson from this experience. As soon as she does raise the money, her father tries to take it from her because she is a woman and according to him has no need for school and all of her money already belongs to him. This is the issue that Spivak addresses. She argues that the subaltern woman's wants and needs have so long been spoken for by the patriarchy that we have lost the way to ask her what she wants. Tambu receives her education, but only as others saw fit. She never has a say in what she learns and what she does with her education, because everyone has been too busy speaking for her. In the end, we say how it is impossible to save somebody if you don't even know what they originally wanted. Throughout this novel, Tsitsi writes Tambu's story using the language of her oppressors. It seems impossible for Tambu to tell her story without adopting the voice of the British colonial, and this is made clear through her word choice. In The Laugh of Medusa, Helene Tsitsi discusses the importance of women using their own language in their writing instead of adopting that of their male oppressors. She believes that in doing this, women will find the power to speak more openly and more freely without the worries of their male counterparts. Also, they will be able to find a sense of self that does not involve relying on the male language to help them through their lives. However, she does recognize that it's often difficult to make the patriarchy listen to women unless they are using patriarchal languages. She says that it is a double distress, for even if she transgresses, her words fall almost always upon deaf male ears, which hears in the language only that which speaks of the masculine. Even if a woman is using her own language, the male will not listen because he can only hear and understand the language that the patriarchy has fabricated. This becomes a problem for women because if they begin to use their own language, they will be ignored. But if they don't, they are stuck using the language of their oppressors. We see the same problem rise in Dangeremba in her novel. If she writes Tambu's story using the language of a Rhodesian woman, it will fall upon deaf ears. If she writes Tambu's story in the language of the British colonial dictates, she loses her own language. And in order to make the story one that is noticed, Dangeremba has to use irony to signal the problem. This, however, does much more for the novel. Tambu's telling the story through the language of the British colonial, albeit ironically, helps the readers to see just how much she has lost in the process of being saved. Tambu cannot tell her story, a story for a Rhodesian subaltern woman, without the use of the language that has imperialized her. This creates a satire on the language in this novel. Dangeremba's use of the British colonial language emphasizes what has been lost in the attempt to save. She often adopts their ways of describing things, for example, calling her home Darkest Africa, which is something she would have adopted at the mission. Without the language, Tambu would have been left silent. In losing her language, Tambu has not only lost a large portion of her culture, she has also lost her own voice as a Rhodesian woman. However, Dangeremba knows that she must tell the story in order to give the subaltern woman some form of a voice. Abu quotes, "Do the Muslim women really need saving?" Spivak's article and Sixi's focus on a different piece of the subaltern's problem in the world that involves constant oppression and taking over of cultures. Abu discusses how saving leads to a loss of culture, as we can see through the education that Tambu receives and in how her uncle pushes the British colonialism on his country, education system, and family. Each of these are steps towards Tambu's culture becoming a slave to the British colonial dictators. Spivak shows how the Subaltern was spoken for and now, as a result, has lost their voice. This is made obvious in Tambu's struggle to establish her identity between her family and the dictators of the native patriarchy and the British colonialists who educate her. Tsitsi expresses the importance of finding a voice amongst oppressors while recognizing the struggle of using it. In nervous conditions, we witness Tambu's struggle as a subaltern. In the end, she receives the education that she has always wanted, but at a cost. Her culture and voice have been so overshadowed by British colonialism that it has become hard to find. When she attempts to regain it through telling her story, she can only find a voice within the language of those who have saved her. Together, these works express the saving of subaltern women can be harmful because it is almost impossible to see what has been taken in the process until you truly understand.